Hello everyone, welcome back to our adult education class here at St. Mary's Orthodox Church in Bluefield, West Virginia. Today we're taking a different turn at what we typically talk about. Today we're having a history class, a history of the American Carpatho-Russian Orthodox Diocese of the United States. Let us begin with a prayer. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, Amen. O Heavenly King, the Comforter, the Spirit of truth, who are in all places and fill all things, treasury of blessings and giver of life, come and dwell within us and cleanse us from every blemish and save our souls, O Blessed One. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, Amen. Glory be to Jesus Christ. Right. So today we're talking about a general overview of the history of our diocese. By no means is this an exhaustive overview. By no means is it's going to give you the basic facts. We do have a diocesan historian. His name is Father Lawrence Barringer. He's actually a priest in one of our churches in Pennsylvania. The city, I believe, his name is Freeland, Pennsylvania. He's been serving our church there for quite a number of years, and he's written 2 books. One is called Good Victory. It's this maroon book right here. It was printed at Holy Cross, the Greek school in Boston, at Hellenic College. It's simply called Good Victory, and it goes from our founding bishop, Orestes Konyak, whom we'll be mentioning today, all the way up into the present time. Not present, not when Bishop Gregory took over, but up into and including the mid-90s. And the other one, this one's about 187 pages. The other one here is a short history. It's called Glory Be to Jesus Christ, a history of the American Carpatho-Russian Orthodox Diocese. This one is also printed by Holy Cross Press in Boston at the Hellenic College. This one's a bit shorter. With all your endnotes, you're looking at 152 pages, and both by Father Lawrence Barringer. You can purchase both of these books at our seminary bookstore, Christ the Savior Seminary, for $5 each. Wow. They're very inexpensive. So you get both at orthodoxgoods.com. That's the website address for our Christ the Savior Seminary bookstore. But in any case, the purpose of our class tonight isn't to sell you books. Of course, why I preface the whole lesson with introducing those 2 books, Good Victory and Glory Be to Jesus Christ, the history of the diocese, is because a lot of the stuff we're going to cover today is gleaned from those books. In other words, Father Lawrence is our official diocesan historian, and whatever we're going to cover today is in his 2 books. But first, I'd like to preface again, if I could, the class by talking about one of my favorite saints, Saint Alexis Toth, the confessor of Orthodoxy in America, or the defender of Orthodoxy in America. The reason why I want to mention Saint Alexis Toth in our history lesson tonight is because he is, if you will, the forefather of the formation of our diocese. And he's Carpatho-Russian himself, even though he was glorified in 1994 by the OCA. And his whole body lies in a casket, in a reliquary casket in the Church of St. Tikhon of Zadonsk in South Canaan, Pennsylvania, at St. Tikhon's Monastery and Seminary. Even though he's in the possession of the OCA, he is himself Carpatho-Russian. He came from the Austro-Hungarian Empire. And he came to this country in October 1889 as not an Orthodox priest, but a Uniate priest, a priest of the Byzantine Catholic background, because his country, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, was overrun by the Roman Catholic evangelists, and a lot of what they did in the Austro-Hungarian Empire was political. In other words, they gave the Orthodox churches a choice. because they were establishing Roman Catholicism throughout the country, they gave the Orthodox churches, because they were very poor, two options. You could either stay with your respective patriarch and be oppressed by our churches that we're establishing here in this country, or you could become one of us. In other words, you could retain all of your liturgical customs, all of the customs of your people, but you would have to commemorate the Pope of Rome at the Divine Liturgy instead of your respective patriarch. In other words, breaking formally their tie to Holy Orthodoxy and becoming schismatics.
Apostatizing.
Or apostatizing from the true faith, precisely. And thus the Uniate Church was born in Prešov in the 17th century, about 150 years before St. Alexis Toth was born. There's two unions that were established in the Austro-Hungarian Empire. The first union is called the Union of Brest, B-R-E-S-T. Brest. It's a city in and around Prešov, in the Carpathian region of the foothills of Russia. Or you could also refer to the Union of Usarad, which is another city that runs along on the rivers in Carpatho-Russia. And there were these two cities in which they signed pacts or concordances. The former Orthodox churches that were becoming Uniate churches signed agreements with these Roman Catholic evangelists, saying that they would, in fact, become one of them and commemorate the Pope of Rome instead of the Patriarch. And there's many reasons why they went to the Roman Church, why they apostatized from the true faith of Orthodoxy. The first one is political. Firstly, they would have went and joined up with the Romans because they were offered by the Romans political protection from the other people who were either policing or threatening to conquer the government. The Romans offered political protection. The Orthodox were very poor in the Austro-Hungarian Empire, in the foothills of Carpatho-Russia. So what did the Romans do? They said, well, if you come under the protection, quote unquote, of the Pope of Rome, or if you come under his rule as the universal head of the church, we'll pay you a salary. So the priests in these poor Orthodox parishes were going home and talking to their wives and saying, well, honey, if we join up with Rome, if our parish goes and pledges allegiance to the Roman Pope, well, Rome will pay me a salary, triple of what our people could give us. That was the deciding factor. You see, all of these things are political. Another reason was that the Roman clergy, the Orthodox noticed, because of their power within the country, that the Roman clergy were being treated better, not as second-class citizens, but as nobility. So the Orthodox clergy that did leave Orthodoxy noticed this about their Roman counterparts.
There's a little bit of professional hubris there, then.
You could stretch it to that. And this was the world that St. Alexis Toth was a part of. Because he was born about 150 years later. He was born on March 18th, 1854. March 18th, 1854. And it says here on my cheat sheet, because I don't have all of these things memorized, he was born into a poor Carpatho-Russian family. And like many others in the Austro-Hungarian Empire at the time, the Toths were Eastern Rite Catholics, or Uniates.
Question.
Yes, sir.
Favorite Sophia asked me that before class. I looked it up pre-class. Google did not satisfy me. I still don't quite know how you define Unitism and what this means. It's kind of Catholic?
No,
right?
It is Catholic.
It is Catholic.
Well, let's specify here, because when we say Catholic, the Orthodox Church is the Catholic Church.
Right, universal.
But the word Catholic, just like the word Orthodox, means right believing. It doesn't necessarily, Catholic just doesn't mean universal, like the Romans falsely teach and misinterpret it to be. Just because an organization is throughout the world, it doesn't make it Catholic. The Masons are throughout the world. Does that make the Masons Catholic? You see what I mean? I mean, there's all different types of heretical groups throughout the world. That doesn't make them Catholic. Catholicism and Orthodoxy could be equated to one and the same thing, because when you speak about Catholicity, you're speaking about not only a universal church, but you're talking about a universal faith. A faith that is true, a faith that is correct, a faith that is from the apostles, that Jesus Christ handed on to the original 12, and that the original 12 handed to the early Christians, and who became the early fathers of the church. You see, so the word uniat means those Eastern churches that are directly tied to the Pope of Rome, the ones who are under what we would call in Orthodoxy the Omophorion, or under the spiritual protection of the Pope of Rome. And the word uniat denotes also this, that even though the uniate churches, or the Byzantine Catholic, Greek Catholic churches, that's how they identify themselves in this country, they're Greek Catholic churches. They're Roman Catholics that use a different form of what the Romans call the Mass, or the Eucharistic service. So the Uniates, or the Greek Catholics, use a very similar divine liturgy that's very close to what us Orthodox use. In fact, they'll call it the Liturgy of St. John Chrysostom.
Are they anywhere close to us, these Uniate churches?
Oh, you mean geographically? Is there any close to here? I don't know. I don't think so. I haven't run into any. As far as Roman Catholic churches, I've only ever seen one, and that's in downtown Bluefield.
Yeah, Sacred Heart.
But the Byzantine Catholic churches, or the Uniate churches, you won't see Uniate on their sign, on their church sign, if you run into one of them, because Uniate is a derogatory term that was developed by the Orthodox to say, well, you're the schismatics, you're the ones that apostatize from the true faith, and you through this political machination or offerings, you went in communion with the Pope of Rome, who was a schismatic in 1054 at the Great Schism. The Pope led the first Protestant revolution, if you will, because they broke away from the true faith.
Wow.
And that was back in 1054. So the Uniate churches will look very much like the Orthodox churches. They'll worship in a very similar fashion. So they'll look, walk, and talk just like the Orthodox Christians. Or as far as their clergy go, they'll look, walk, and talk like Orthodox clergy.
Except they're a goose, not a duck.
Except they're a goose, not a duck, precisely. They may seem to be like they're Orthodox, but they're not at all, because they don't have the correct theology. They're not tied to a patriarch. They have a very skewed form of Orthodox theology, because it's tainted by Roman Catholicism. Because, like I said, they're Roman Catholics that use a different form of worship.
Is that wafers and everything? That's Western Rite?
I didn't get into that yet, but there was a period in this country that was known as the period of Latinization. So these Uniate groups that were formed in the Old Country, like I mentioned, from the Union of Brest and the Union of Bucerod in the 17th century, these groups that were coming to the United States when they were immigrating, when they got here to America, the Roman Catholic presence was already very strong. And the Roman bishops were forcing the Uniate churches, or these Byzantine Catholic churches, to look as much as they could like their Roman Catholic counterparts, because they were the same church. So the Roman bishops were forcing these Uniate churches, the Uniate clergy particularly, to dress like Roman clergy. In other words, wear clergy shirts. Don't wear your cassock around. Cut off your beard. You want to blend in with the Roman clergy. The Roman bishops were saying this to the Uniate priests. And you better hope you were never married, or sometimes you wouldn't even be able to serve as a priest in this country. That's what happened to St. Alexis Toth. St. Alexis Toth was married in Hungary, and his wife died before he came to the Americas. And when he met with one of the local bishops in this country, the infamous Bishop Ireland, Bishop Ireland refused to let him serve as a priest because he was once married. He was a widower. He outright refused. He said, "You'll cause a scandal to my Roman Catholic clergy in this country." He basically laicized him. And of course, Alexis Toth got very angry, and he called a meeting in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania. That's what we call him, St. Alexis Toth of Wilkes-Barre. He first ministered in a small community in Minneapolis, Minnesota, so he has two names. He's known as St. Alexis Toth of Wilkes-Barre and St. Alexis Toth of Minneapolis. But he called a meeting in Wilkes-Barre of his brother Uniate clergy who were going through these Latinizations, like you just mentioned, Eustace. Like they were even going so far to tell the priest that you have to use wafers instead of risen bread for Holy Communion. You have to dress in Roman Catholic vestments. You can't have an iconostas because our churches won't look the same. The only thing that designated them from the Roman churches was a cross they developed that they called the Cross of the Unia. And you know how our crosses are shaped on the top of the church? Of course, you have the beam that runs up and down, and then you have the three bars, and the bottom one is slanted. Well, the Cross of the Unia, they took that slanted beam and straightened it out. And to this day, some of...
Like that one here. The one behind you is not slanted.
Right. So it's just like this. You have the three beams running the same way. Parallel. And that was known as the Cross of the Unia, to designate Uniate churches or Byzantine Catholic, Greek Catholic churches from the Orthodox churches. So St. Alexis Toth, after that meeting in Wilkes-Barre, after he was rejected by the local Roman ordinary, he had a meeting of his brother priests, and he said, "I'm going to do what I dreamed about doing in the old country. I'm going to return to Orthodoxy. I'm going to return to our mother church, and I suggest, brothers, that you do the same." So he left that meeting in Wilkes-Barre and he journeyed to California, because that's where the local Orthodox church was. The Russian Orthodox church that was headed by Bishop Nicholas. They came into the country in 1794. Of course, Bishop Nicholas didn't come then, but we're talking the 19th century. He journeyed to California, where the Orthodox churches were coming down into the mainland after they left Alaska. They came down into California. So he met Bishop Nicholas in California, and Bishop Nicholas accepted him as a priest. Alexis Toth made his profession of faith in the true faith of the Orthodox Church. He apostatized his old heretical roots, and Bishop Nicholas vested him as an Orthodox priest. And he officially became Orthodox through chrismation. And Bishop Nicholas gave him the responsibility of evangelizing, being an evangelist in America. Since he was not a married priest, he didn't have to be tied down with a family. So St. Alexis was given the mission to evangelize North America by Bishop Nicholas. And Alexis Toth brought back into Orthodoxy 17 different Uniate communities that he was involved with. 17 different Uniate churches, or these Greek Catholic churches, brought them away from the Pope back into Orthodoxy. And also, there's another 15 to 20 churches that he began I say 15 to 20 because those 5 or so, they're disputing, well, who were we founded by? Was it St. Alexis Toth, or was it somebody else? Or somebody that heard St. Alexis, or was it St. Alexis himself? So, just to give St. Alexis the benefit of the doubt, we'll say he founded 20 other Orthodox churches. So if you add 17 and 20 together, you're looking at 37. So 37 whole communities he founded as Orthodox churches, or brought back into the faith of the Holy Orthodox Church. That's what we call him, the confessor and defender of Orthodoxy in America. I mean, this class is not about St. Alexis Toth, but this man suffered greatly in America after becoming Orthodox. He was persecuted by his former uniate parishes in Minneapolis and in Wilkes-Barre. They drove him out of churches. He was taken to court. The uniate churches were fighting over property with the Orthodox. It was a terrible time. But St. Alexis's faith prevailed. His preaching prevailed, pointing out the errors of the Roman Church and bringing his brothers and sisters back into the true faith of Orthodoxy.
How old is he when he's out there in California? Because his wife is dead. Is he 40s, 50s, 60s? He's not a young guy, is it?
No, I would venture to guess, just going off dates, because he was ordained in 1878. He got to this country in 1889.
He reposed in 1907.
You got it. He reposed in 1907, so he wasn't very old.
Okay.
I don't know the exact math.
Okay.
But I would imagine when he was here in America, he was in and around his
That's how young he was. He
his
proposed
mid-40s.
at age 50,
Okay.
53.
Mm-hmm.
Very young.
Right.
Wow.
Thank you for the quick math, Jenny. But yeah, he wasn't very old.
This article here really
Yeah.
says it nicely.
When did you say he reposed?
According to this, it says in 1907, but I don't know if that's right or
1907.
not. That seems a little odd.
Now it says in my little write-up here, and this comes from the OCA as well, that he was considered for a candidate for the episcopacy in 1907.
Where did I see that? That's wrong.
And then it says his health began to decline in 1908, and then he reposed in the Lord on Friday, May 7th, 1909.
Okay. 2 years later.
So May 7th is his feast day on the new calendar, and April 24th on the old calendar. So all of that said, so remember the date or the year 1909. So let's refer to our handout. So we're going to do a traditional high school history class style here. We're going to take turns reading as if we're reading a history book.
Can you read so we can take notes?
Yes, sir.
Okay, please.
Because I'll, of course, offer commentary
Please. Yes.
as we go through the paragraphs.
Please.
So our handout, you have these nice pictures on the top. This top picture, I'm going to try to get as close as possible to the camera.
Yeah, it says it right here, which is when God gave blessed repose to his faithful servant, Father Alexis, in 1907, in what blessed place was he laid to rest? So that, I don't know which one.
Yeah, so we got like a 2-year discrepancy on
Yeah.
when Alexis Toth actually reposed in the Lord. That's interesting. But in any case, it doesn't bog down the point that I'm trying to make. So remember 1907 or 1909.
Still very young, yeah.
He's still very young. But let's refer to our handout. The American Carpatho-Russian Orthodox Diocese of the USA, under the spiritual protection of the Ecumenical Patriarch of Constantinople. So that this picture that I'm showing everybody and that everybody has on their handout is the picture of when our very first bishop, Metropolitan Orestes Konyuk, came back to the New York Harbor after being consecrated as a bishop. This is in the year 1938. So our talk about St. Alexis led up to this. So remember what I was saying. He was leading whole churches that were uniates back into Orthodoxy. St. Alexis was. So, and then you have a formation of a diocese, of a Carpatho-Russian diocese, how many years later? A little less than 30.
About 30, yeah.
A little less than 30. You have the formation of the American Carpatho-Russian Orthodox Church in the United States, a little less than 30 years after St. Alexis reposed.
Hmm.
So what St. Alexis began and what he was doing didn't just stop at his death. Because, as we begin to read, first paragraph, in July 1935, 37 parishes who were in opposition to Latinizations. These Latinizations were like I described. The Roman bishops were forcing the Uniate clergy, or the Greek Catholic clergy, to look, talk, and walk like the Roman clergy in America, and celebrate the liturgy in a similar fashion. The only thing they were able to keep was their liturgical language.
Hmm.
They still used the liturgy of St. John Chrysostom in their liturgical language, but it looked as if they were celebrating the Roman Latin High Mass.
Hmm.
So, 37 parishes who were in opposition to Latinization. Attempts by the Roman Catholic clergy petitioned that a church congress be held to decide the future of Carpatho-Russian churches in the United States. This is known as the First Diocesan Sobor Council. And this council was called in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania on November 23rd, 1937 by Father Orestes P. Konyuk, who was then appointed as the administrator of the diocese being formed. The Sobor abrogated the 300-year-old Unia. So brothers and sisters, for 300 years after this union of Brest and Userod, the Orthodox churches that went into political union with the Roman Church were held captive. 300 years. The Carpatho-Russian people didn't have an Orthodox bishop. 300 years they were in captivity to the Romans. So this Sobor abrogated a 300-year-old Unia and returned the Carpatho-Russian people to the ancestral faith of the Orthodox, or the ancestral Orthodox faith, the faith of their fathers. On St. Alexis's icon, some of them, when he's simply vested in priestly vestments, he has a scroll in his hand. And it's a court defense. It's a defense that he wrote when he was taken to court. And it says something to the effect that, brothers and sisters, the faith of the Orthodox is your ancestral faith. This faith, which has established the universe, is the faith that we are to hold on to, because this is the faith of our fathers, the faith of the true church and the faith of the apostles, and hold to it. This was a court case defense that St. Alexis made. But this is the ancestral Orthodox faith we talk about. The clergy at this Sobor elected the Right Reverend Orestes P. Konyuk as the bishop nominee of the new diocese. This, I'm going to stop there, the bishop nominee of a new diocese. This makes us unique amongst the Orthodox jurisdictions in America. Why? Because when a bishop dies in our diocese, we have a similar meeting to what they had to form the diocese. The priests of this diocese are the only priests in any jurisdiction in America that are able to nominate their next bishop. And we could choose from amongst the celibates of our own clergy if we want to, and nominate them and put their names into the ecumenical patriarch.
What do the others do then?
That I'm not sure of.
The EP makes decisions.
It's top down.
Yeah, usually the ecumenical
Which is what
patriarch
happened with
makes
the
decisions.
archdiocese.
Right.
That should happen with the archbishop.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're right, Jenny. With the recently enthroned new Archbishop of America, El Pififoros, he was chosen by the ecumenical patriarch. Of course, they voted in Constantinople, but the Greek Orthodox Church in America didn't have an official vote like I'm talking about here. The ecumenical patriarch chose him. I mean, he was elected, but the names were chosen in Constantinople. So that's why I say we're the only jurisdiction in America that retains this age-old tradition. Like when our last bishop was elected in 2012, Bishop Gregory Taxis, or Metropolitan Gregory of Nyssa, he was chosen by the clergy of the diocese. They called a special meeting, and Bishop Gregory was unanimously nominated by all of our clergy to be the next bishop of our diocese.
That's still subject to impat approval, though, right?
Of course,
Okay.
the names are then sent to the ecumenical throne, and they do have their official voting process. So the bishop nominee, his name is sent to the ecumenical patriarch,
Okay.
and the ecumenical patriarch must choose 2 others, so there has to be 3 names on the ballot for the Holy Synod in Constantinople to vote. And then they make the decision. But in our case,
Why is it that the Carpatho-Russian diocese, I think I know the answer, so I don't know if I should still ask it, but I know the answer. But I'll throw it out anyway, that when you talk with the Antiochians, the OCA, no, maybe OCA is different. None of these dioceses commemorate Bartholomew, but the Carpatho-Russian does, and it's because of this whole history with Unia. Because I think when they went back to the mother church, they said, you will commemorate the ecumenical.
you're exactly right, Jenny. Yeah,
And so that's why that happened here in
Right.
America.
Mm-hmm.
But there was a question there, other question. And sometimes I don't understand why the others, is it because they're autonomous and the Carpatho-Russian is not considered autonomous?
Oh, we're an autonomous self-ruling diocese.
So why is it that you'll go to a Greek Orthodox church, you'll go to an Antiochian one, that they don't commemorate Bartholomew?
Yeah, well, the Antiochians have a different patriarch.
Well, that's true.
Right.
But he's considered, quote, equal among,
Yeah, he's the
equals.
first amongst equals. But if he's not your patriarch, you wouldn't commemorate him at the Divine Liturgy.
Okay.
So,
Like,
but
for
the Greek Orthodox churches don't commemorate him.
Right, they don't,
Okay, who do
they
they
commemorate the Jageron of America, the Archbishop of America,
Yeah, or their metropolitan.
their
And
metropolitan.
my
Right.
other question would be, why, when this happened in, 1937?
1938, the diocese
Okay,
was officially formed.
Why was the choice, I mean, if they were mostly Slavic and Austro-Hungarian Empire, why didn't they go to the Russian Patriarch? Why did they go under the EP?
The reason why they went under the EP was because it goes back to that union of Brest and the union of Usarad. These Orthodox churches were under the pastoral care of the ecumenical patriarch before they sided. Yeah, in the 1700s.
Okay.
Before they sided with Rome. Before they broke communion with the ecumenical
So that
throne.
was the reason.
That's the reason why. And also, you had this other phenomena going on in America amongst the Russian Orthodox Church because they were so large. They were saying to these Uniate churches, and what happened eventually to a lot of these Uniate churches that St. Alexis Thoth brought back into Orthodoxy, and the ones that were coming back in the example of St. Alexis Thoth, they were becoming Russified. In other words, they were no longer Carpatho-Russian, or they were no longer Ukrainian. They were becoming Russified. In other words, the Russian Orthodox Church was imposing their chant traditions upon them. They were making the new Orthodox priests wear high back vestments. They were making the churches look Russian.
Nationalization.
There was a nationalization sort of thing. You're right.
So it was the Carpatho-Russian at the time unions who made the decision that they did not want that.
They didn't want to be crucified, precisely. That's another reason why. Not only the fact that their ancestors were once under the spiritual protection of the ecumenical throne, but they also didn't they didn't want to become crucified when they started to form our diocese. That's what they talked about at this meeting in July of 1935. They didn't want to become Russians, because they weren't Russians. They're Carpatho-Russians coming from.
Yeah, a lot of Orthodox people don't know that, because like when I was at the monastery talking to some people, they just, because they would hear Carpatho-Russian, they just assumed that it was under the, with the Russian Patriarchate.
Right.
And, I'm going to send a copy of these articles to a couple people I know,
Certainly.
as well as the icon.
Certainly. Yeah, but that's the reason why they returned to the ecumenical throne. And that's what our next paragraph says. So if we read on, the Carpatho-Russian Orthodox Church prior to the Unia was under the jurisdiction of the Ecumenical Patriarchate. Because Carpatho-Russians received Christianity from St. Cyril and St. Methodius from Constantinople, that's why St. Cyril and Methodius equal to the apostles and teachers of the Slavs. That's why they're our patron saints of the diocese. They were Greek from Constantinople.
Some Bulgarians would say they were Bulgarian.
You're right.
There was a big issue with that when I was traveling up there.
Right. And so some of our own people in the Carpatho-Russian diocese mistake and say they're Russian or they're Slavic.
And
they're not Slavic at all.
That's where you get the Cyrillic alphabet from.
Right.
St. Cyril, because they actually put the language for the Slavs into Slavic, and that's where you get the word Cyrillic.
Right. And the portions of the Cyrillic alphabet are Greek characters, because I suppose Saint Cyril didn't have a letter for some things, so he just simply used the Greek letter that he was used to using because he was Greek.
What were the Slavic countries?
Um,
Bulgaria?
We're talking about Hungary, Yugoslavia, the Ukraine could be included in there before they became an official country. When we talk about Carpatho-Russia or Carpatho Rus, we're talking.
Range.
It's a mountain range.
Yeah, Carpathian range.
We're talking about the Carpathian Mountains, because the Carpatho-Russians, if you will, never had their own country. They didn't have their own government system. They came in the territory and under the governance of multiple different peoples throughout their history, until almost all of them emigrated to the United States. That's why you had such a big influx of these Uniate churches in America. And that's what we're talking about tonight. But Cyril Methodius, coming from Constantinople, because the Patriarch of Constantinople held canonical jurisdiction over all the new churches in the diaspora. So Carpatho-Russia, or Carpatho-Rus, or Subcarpathia, whichever one you'd like to call it, was a new territory outside of Russia. And therefore, since it was a new territory in the diaspora, or the dispersion, it fell under the jurisdiction of the Ecumenical Patriarch. The First Diocesan Sober decided to petition the Ecumenical Patriarch. Now this is flashing back into 1935. They decided to petition the Ecumenical Patriarchate to accept the Carpatho-Russians into Orthodoxy and canonically establish a new diocese. So just like our Ukrainian brothers and sisters that recently received a new diocese, our people wanted the same thing back in the 30s. Or the Carpatho-Russians that formed the diocese wanted the same thing back in the 30s, and they petitioned the Ecumenical Patriarch. No other patriarch, the Ecumenical Patriarch. Let's read on.
They went through the channels.
Yeah, they went through the channels, and if I could venture to say that, the right channel.
That's what I'm saying.
The Ecumenical Patriarch accepted the petition and received the Carpatho-Russian Church into Orthodoxy as a self-governing diocese, or an autonomous diocese, like we were just previously talking. On September 19th, 1938, the diocese was canonized by Patriarch Benjamin I of thrice blessed memory, in the name of the Holy Orthodox Church in Christ, under patriarchal decree. This is the protocol number, 1379 of that year. This was the first Carpatho-Russian Orthodox Church since the infamous Papal Unia, like we were talking about. And Father Orestes P. Konyak was consecrated the day prior, September 18th, as the bishop of the diocese. So that's a picture of Orestes. Sort of, because it's half and half, because the way the printer printed this page. You could sort of see the one with the, let me show the camera. The one with the crown at the bottom of page 1 and the top of page 2, that's Bishop Orestes Konyak. And Good Victory, the maroon book that I showed you by Father Lawrence, it begins with the early childhood history of Bishop Orestes.
Was he born in this country?
No,
He was not.
he was not. Bishop Orestes, don't quote me on this because it is in Good Victory. I believe he was born, I think it was near Prešov. It might be Hungary, I'm not sure. Let me see if it's right on the first page. No, it's not. But no, Bishop Orestes was born in the Austro-Hungarian Empire. I just found it here. His name was Orestes, and he was born on the 11th of July in 1883.
Tomorrow.
Yeah.
Happy birthday.
Yeah, it would be tomorrow. 1883. 1883, in the village of Ortova. It's spelled Ortutova in Austro-Hungary. So, Orestes Konyak was our first bishop.
Right now, are they all Uniats that are in this country?
Not all of
No,
them.
no.
Because when these unions, the Union of Brest and the Union of Vyšehrad took place, there were churches, of course, that kept the true faith and remained Orthodox. So no, not all of them. Not all of them are Uniate. It was very common, though, in villages for the local priest to, if he did choose to go to the Unia, well, the people who wanted to remain Orthodox, the Orthodox Church would send an Orthodox priest, and they would build another church. So you'd have a Uniate Byzantine Greek Catholic Church, and then you'd have the Russian Orthodox Church, or the Carpatho-Russian Orthodox Church in this case, in the old country.
Our church down at Elkhorn had Greek Catholic.
Yes.
An official title.
So remember now, when the first immigrants came to this country, they were one of the two. They were either Uniates, who, when they came to this country, were under the Pope, and then they returned to Orthodoxy, which is the case in a lot of our parishes in our diocese, because you're now learning the history of how it happened. Or they came to this, they immigrated to the country, and they had remained Orthodox in the old country, so they were established here as Orthodox churches. But why does it say Greek Catholic? See, because our the Carpatho-Russian people didn't have their own country, their own unified country, or unified government, or their own army, or whatever you may have. They were in the diaspora areas of Rus. They identified with this word Greek Catholic. In other words, it wasn't a religious orientation, or it wasn't a religious church, or it wasn't a way to describe their religion. It was a way to describe their ethnicity, because they were ruled by the Hungarians, they were ruled by the Austrians, they were ruled by the Slovaks, they were ruled by the Polacks, and I'm sorry, the Polish people, the Russians. Thank you for the chuckle, Ginny. But they were ruled by so many people. They created their own. They had to create their own ethnic origin, and because they were a smattering of Uniate churches and Orthodox churches, they came up with this coined phrase that really the Austro-Hungarian government came up for them. This strange people that weren't like us. They gave them the name Greek Catholics. These are Greek Catholics. We have to create an ethnicity name for them. So when they came to this country, they used that name that they were given in the old country. That's why you have on some churches, for example, St. Mary's Greek Catholic Orthodox Church. Because Greek Catholic was that ethnic origin that was made up for the people that came from this country, that particular part of Carpatho-Russian.
It's kind of what happens today in our Bible Belt, because I have a hard time trying to say that the church here is not Greek Orthodox, it's
No.
Carpatho or it's Pan-Orthodox, because most people associate, at least in the West, Orthodoxy with Greek.
Right.
Or, in some cases, Russian. But that's just because I think this country has not quite evolved to the point where it's going to, American Orthodoxy or something.
Right.
So in a way, I didn't realize what you just said is very interesting about, that's kind of the label that the Austro-Habsburg, is Austro-Habsburg and Austro-Hungarian, synonymous terms?
I'm not a historian, but I believe
think
it's
they are.
synonymous.
I remember when I studied history in college, the Austro-Habsburg or Austro-Hungarian Empire fascinated me. And if I had my notes, I'd go over them again. I'm not sure why at the time it fascinated me, but probably there was, I don't remember a lot of it now, but I didn't realize that was the reason for Greek Catholic.
That was the reason for Greek
Yeah, I
Catholic.
didn't know that was.
So that was
I remember
never-
when I was living in Tennessee, this friend of mine from Pennsylvania asked me that question. What is this Greek Catholic? And I didn't know at the time.
Yeah, it refers to the Uniate churches.
Yeah, did not know.
Now it does. Because now we, of course, Orthodoxy is firmly established in this country. I mean, we're sparse, we're not everywhere and densely populated, but in the infancy days of our diocese, that's why they put the word Greek Catholic on the cornerstones, and then they followed it up by saying Orthodox. So, my own home parish back in St. Clair, Pennsylvania, St. Michael's Orthodox Church, as it's known today. You know what the original charter says, how it was incorporated into the state of Pennsylvania? The official name for St. Michael's Orthodox Church is St. Michael's Greek Catholic Carpatho-Russian Union. That's how it was incorporated, because some parishes, when they were still immigrating to America, you had, because they came from the same village, you had Uniate Roman Catholics, and you had Orthodox Christians, and because they had this banner title of Greek Catholic, they were going to the same church, and they were banding together because of their ethnicity in the same church building. Though some came from one side of the road where they went to the Uniate church, and the other ones went to the Orthodox church, they still went into the same church building because of their common ethnicity. And then you have all of these strange names.
I remember asking Father Athanasius in Thessaloniki when I was getting ready to come home, and I said, look at this name of this church here, American Carpatho-Russian Greek Catholic. And he said, well, I just want to cover all the bases.
Right. Yeah, and at our last Sobor, 3 years ago, if you notice on your front page, it says American Carpatho-Russian Orthodox Diocese of the United States, Ecumenical Patriarch Constantinople. We dropped that nomenclature from the title of our diocese, because the original title of the diocese had Greek Catholic in it. But only 3 years ago did we drop it, because we said at Sobor, it doesn't make sense. Why are we still retaining this title?
It doesn't have any meaning.
It doesn't have any meaning anymore.
Historically it would, but not theologically.
Right, there's no theological meaning. Our people are no longer coming from the Unia and from the old country, so why do we need this for them to identify with? So we dropped it. Amongst other things in the diocesan bylaws, but this class isn't about diocesan bylaws. So let's continue on our handout, right next to Bishop Orestes, or Metropolitan Orestes cut-off picture there. Like I said, this is a very short history of the diocese. This is a smattering of different things. So the next paragraph reads, the Carpatho-Russian Youth Organization, or the ACRY, the acronym, was founded during the first year of the bishop's administration. And in 1946, the official newspaper, so the ACRY, the American Carpatho-Russian Youth Organization, was founded in 1938. It says that it's the same year as his first year of being a bishop. And then in 1946, the official newspaper of the diocese, which we still have today, the Church Messenger, was established and continues to print a bi-weekly newspaper to this day. The American Carpatho-Russian Youth, the ACRY, was reorganized in 1947. Then, Christ the Savior Cathedral was established and incorporated in 1950. That's in Johnstown, Pennsylvania, thus making Johnstown, Pennsylvania the seat of the diocese. And then a year later, in 1951, Christ the Savior Seminary, the seminary that I attended to and graduated from, was permanently relocated to Johnstown. Students formerly were taught in temporary quarters located in New York City, Nicholson, Pennsylvania, and Bridgeport, Connecticut. That's where the original seminaries were. And they were small houses of study. In these cities that were just mentioned, as far as Christ the Savior Seminary goes, in New York City, Nicholson, Pennsylvania, and Bridgeport, Connecticut, they were just houses attached to a church. They were small, very small seminaries, maybe the size of our hall here, not very big. Does anybody know where the first cathedral was in the diocese? Where was the first cathedral? It doesn't say it on our handout here. Our first cathedral was St. John the Baptist Orthodox Church in Bridgeport, Connecticut. So that one location that's mentioned where Christ the Savior Seminary once was, that's also where Bishop Orestes had his first cathedral. Then he officially relocated the entire diocese in 1950 to Johnstown, Pennsylvania.
Jenny, didn't Father Mark come from Bridgeport, Connecticut?
Oh, really? Did he serve there?
He served there and he thought it was terrible. He was right in the ghetto. It's very dangerous.
Yeah, the area is sprucing itself up since then. I mean, it's St. John's, the former cathedral church that we're talking about. It's on Broadbridge Avenue. It's right down the street from the hospital, or they built a new hospital. So it's not too bad now. Let's read on. During the ensuing years, many achievements were realized once the diocese was established and growing. Bishop Orestes began to seek a bishop to assist him in his responsibilities because he was growing old. He was a widower. He was serving as a priest for years and years and years before he was consecrated as a bishop. And then the ecumenical patriarchate elected and appointed Bishop Peter Szymanski as auxiliary bishop in 1963. Shortly after his consecration, he became ill, and after serving only 6 months, he reposed in the Lord on May 17th, 1964. On January 1st, 1966, at the Holy Trinity Greek Orthodox Cathedral in New York, Bishop Orestes was elevated from the rank of bishop to the rank of metropolitan. So even in our diocesan bylaws today, the bishop could choose to have an auxiliary bishop. And the same sort of process would happen as when we elect a ruling hierarch. The priest would gather in a conference or in a sobor, and they would nominate people. They would nominate priests of the diocese, or other monks that are from local monasteries. We can also choose from the monks of the monasteries in America. So, let's read on. So to replace Bishop Peter, who only served for 6 months, On August 16th, 1966, the Holy Synod of the Ecumenical Patriarchate appointed and elected Bishop John Martin, who's pictured right to the left there, as auxiliary to His Eminence Metropolitan Orestes. Bishop Martin was consecrated in Christ the Savior Cathedral because it was already established in 1950. He was consecrated on October 6th. During his episcopacy, the new bishop revamped numerous aspects of diocesan administration. This is very important, this next line. An English liturgy book for the pews was first published. Up until that point, our priests were doing everything in Old Church Slavonic. The seminary curriculum was revised. 3 new mission parishes were established. A clergy pension fund was established, or a clergy retirement fund. That's what the pension is.